Hello everyone, welcome to another collection video, this time the Sega Saturn, a console that I always wanted during its run before the Dreamcast, but around here it was pretty much non-existent. I saw it in stores maybe one time and then it was just gone. It came and went and I stuck with the PlayStation, and it's one of those systems that when I finally got it, I really enjoy the Sega Saturn, and it's one of those consoles that I wish had been more successful and more available, especially where I'm at in the US versus Japan, where it was very popular, because a lot of the North American titles that I would be interested in are way too expensive now to really make it worth grabbing. So it's a console that I have a good collection for, and there's still a few games that I want for it. But if I had the Sega Saturn back when it came out in '95, this would probably be as big as my PS1 collection. But here's my complete in box Sega Saturn. That's pretty much my backup system, because I have a second Sega Saturn here with the Action Replay cart in there, where you can put, that's a slot where you put RAM packs or different memory packs into the Sega Saturn. This cart allows you to play games from different regions, and then for the Saturn library, it's kind of a necessity unless you grab a Japanese Sega Saturn, because the vast majority of Sega Saturn games, especially affordable and good Sega Saturn games, are Japanese. Starting with my North American collection of games, we have Warcraft 2, The Dark Saga. This is actually a pretty decent consoleized port of Warcraft 2 and its expansion set, Beyond the Dark Portal. So it's a lot of fun, considering that you're just using a Saturn controller and not a mouse, and the limitations of having both the game and the expansion running on one disc on the Sega Saturn. It's a pretty good port, not as good as the original PC and Mac version, but it's a pretty decent conversion to console. I really enjoy it. The first game I ever got for the Sega Saturn, Battle Arena Toshinden Remix, and that was definitely a fun one to get first for the Saturn, because the original Battle Arena Toshinden was the first game I got on the PS1. And this is a slightly enhanced version of the PlayStation 1 release with an extra character. Virtual Cop 2. Theme Park. Panzer Dragoon 2. Mystaria, The Realms of Lore. This is a pretty decent strategy RPG. And D. We also have the not-for-resale version of Virtual Cop that was packed in with a gun con. And a few demo discs here. We have Sega Screams Volume 1, Bug Playable Preview and Video Game Sampler, and my favorite one of these demo discs is definitely the first Panzer Dragoon. A sampler of Nights into Dreams, and then the full release of Nights into Dreams, and this is the not for resale that would have been bundled with the Saturn 3D controller, which is definitely a necessity. I tried playing it both ways with a regular controller and that controller for the original Nights, and definitely works better. Definitely made for that controller. Now for my Japanese releases, we have Wachenroder, which is a Saturn exclusive strategy RPG. Really fun game. I love the art style in here. Fantastic game, and this is actually the first game I ever beat that was fully in Japanese. It's definitely, if you're just kind of learning like me, this is a great RPG to get into if you like turn-based strategy RPGs. It's a lot of fun, and it's very straightforward. It's a very linear game. It's really a little bit of story and text, move on to the next area, battle, rinse and repeat over and over again. So it's very easy to not really get lost in the narrative or figuring out what you have to do next. It's very obvious. And the battle system uses a lot of icons, so it's very easy to figure out how that works. And there are a lot of easy to find full translations for this game, so as you get stuck and can't figure out certain kanji and things like that, it's very easy to look up. So I was able to play through this pretty easily because of all those tools. So if you're looking for an RPG for the Sega Saturn that's very import friendly, with very limited Japanese skills, you can definitely make your way through this, find a guide, and it's a lot of fun. And in that same vein, we have Sakura Taisen. Very glad the Sakura Wars series is coming back and coming to the West for only, the second time, after the Sakura Wars 5 was on PS2 and Wii over here, and now the new one is going to be on PS4. I still wish we could get 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here officially, but yeah, the first two were on Sega Saturn, then they were re-released on the Dreamcast with 3 and 4. Some more RPG goodness, very different from those though. Air's Adventure. And Shining Force 3. And this is part 1. It was released in multiple parts in Japan. We only ever got part 1 just as Shining Force 3 in the US, and that's what this one is. Still have to play through that. Probably my overall favorite Japanese release that I have is the original House of the Dead. My favorite light gun game ever, and it never gets included in later releases on console. House of the Dead 2 has been released a ridiculous number of times. It's unlockable in the entire game, and House of Dead 3 on the Xbox, and it's in the Wii collection, and it's on Dreamcast twice because of the typing of the dead, but the original one, which is my favorite, just kind of gets the short end of the stick. It's never been re-released on consoles. The original Dead or Alive. Some visual novel titles. We have Dracula Detective and The Unsolved. Hyper Science Adventure. This one's pretty interesting. I made my way through most of that. The Unsolved has a lot of FMV cutscenes. Really fun, goofy game. Machi, a renowned visual novel, which has a spiritual sequel that was released in the US recently on PlayStation 4. And One's Eye Connection. I'd like to get more games like this. There's so many on the Sega Saturn, but they're so reading intensive that it's very difficult and very slow moving trying to get through a lot of these, and they're already very slow games, so out of all these, I don't think I've completed any of them. I need to go back and try and find more guides or translations to help me through the parts that I get stuck in. Just a few more titles here. If you're a fan of the Tengai Makyo series, this one is definitely a must-have RPG. Beautiful hand-drawn anime cutscenes. Really fun, really pretty game. Really wish this series had taken off in the West and pretty much has been exclusive to Japan overall. Last up, we have a big special edition box set of Harukaze Sentai V-Force, which is a strategy RPG. Very heavy on the strategy, very heavy on text, and still at this point very difficult for me to get through, but I'm very happy to have grabbed this version. So as I learn more and get further into it, I have a really cool edition. So this big, huge box set includes, up top here, a puzzle sold in the box, a short OVA on VHS, course, the game itself on 3 discs. So far that is our Sega Saturn collection, and yeah, it is one of those systems where if I got into the system back in the 90s, this would probably be one of my largest collections, but as it stands, just a handful more Japanese titles that I want to grab for the system. It's a lot of fun. It's a very hardy console, it seems like, and there are other attachments and things you can do with the Sega Saturn. You can get different things, so you can watch video CDs on it. There's so much you can do with the Sega Saturn. It's a fantastic console, and I really wish that it had not flopped pretty much outside of Japan, and maybe today we would be having just a Sega versus Nintendo console market, no Xbox and maybe no PlayStation even, if the Sega Saturn had taken off the way the Genesis had. The Sega Saturn is a fantastic console, and there are an endless number of really great games for the Sega Saturn, especially if you look into imports.